It's time now for the award-winning #1 local talk show in Northeast Pennsylvania, The Sam Lesante Show. Now here's your host, Sam Lesante.
So, my friends, how many times have you been sitting around the house or doing something and you get an idea and you either want to write something about it or you want to paint a picture or you want to do something, but your creative juices start working and sometimes you don't know if you really have the talent of doing that. Well, today we're going to talk to a gentleman who has been around a while, and he started off not as a journalist, but he developed to be quite a person. Worked for the New York Times, worked for the New York Times Magazine, Wired, Newsweek, wrote a lot of books, even shared a Pulitzer Prize. And that person is Gary Rivlin. He's here today. He's working on a book called Saving Main Street. I found our conversation very interested in the fact that you had contacted me to come up and interview us about your book. But you didn't start off, your background, which we're going to talk about right now, you didn't start off as a journalist.
So I went to college as an engineer, thought I might go to law school, but I felt I had something to say. So I just wanted to try this journalism thing. There was a weekly publication in Chicago where I went to college, the Chicago Reader. And I just told my parents, I'm just taking a year off before law school, and tried it. And I guess the good news to the bad news is they published my first story, and 30 plus years later, I'm still at it. I've had no training, but just do it. Just
going back, okay, to where you said you wanted to go to become a journalist. What was your first story?
So there was a professor, I went to Northwestern, there was a professor from South Africa who had escaped the country under apartheid. He was a black man. And there was some mess up with his passport. And the US government wanted to send him back, but he was scared to go back. So I wrote an article about that, just kind of a human interest thing. He was kind of a well-known professor on campus, interesting figure, and just wrote the story. And they said, we like this, and they printed it, and I guess that's where it began.
And so then what happened after that? Did you begin to write other stories then for them?
Yeah, so this was in the 1980s, and I was living in Chicago. There's the infamous Chicago political machine.
Yes.
Right, and just a great topic. I'm in my early 20s, this idealist, and there was a candidate taking on the Chicago political machine, and I just started covering his campaign, Harold Washington, and he ended up winning. And the next 4 or 5 years of Chicago was fascinating, and I just started writing about it, earned my way into a staff writer job. I mean, it paid all of like 12 grand a year, so it wasn't this great paying job, but it was a time in my life just learning the craft. There's this rule of thumb out there, the 10,000 hour rule. There are some people who are born writers. They're talented, they're great, and it just comes naturally. Most of us, most mere mortals, have to work hard at it. And it's just like there's this idea of you put in your 10,000 hours, like 2,000 a year, 5 years, 10,000 hours, and just do it, and don't like, this is terrible. No, just keep on doing it. Just keep on doing it. You get to rewrite it. You're not. As a writer, you're not carving in stone. You get to rewrite it and rewrite it and rewrite it. And eventually, I became better. Eventually, I just kind of grew in love with the craft of writing. I began as a journalist because I wanted to say something. I didn't like the way politics was being covered. And, within 5 or so years, I just had this real pride in writing and wanted to become a craftsman at it, and just always wanted to get better and better and better. If I'm not getting better, I just want to quit,
When you're looking at journalism and you're writing an article or you're doing a painting, you're painting something, you have an idea. When you're out to do a story, and let's assume it's a political story or it's a human interest story, do you have decisions as to what you want to get out of that story, or do you start openly and just go address it openly and saying whatever happens?
Yeah, I always tell people who are going to be interviewed by a journalist, the worst thing in the world is if the journalist knows what he or she is writing about before they get there.
Okay. Now remember, I mean, when you call me, remember you said I work for the New York Times, et cetera, and I said I'm more than happy to discuss this with anyone. But if you're coming with an agenda, don't even
Right.
talk to me about it. And I'm glad you said that because. So continue on. I just wanted to say that that's what I said to you.
I do remember it. If you're an outside journalist, I live in New York City. Coming to Hazleton in particular, yes, there's been some pretty preconceived notions where you feel like the reporter wrote the story before he or she showed up. I know that. You know, everyone talks about objective. You know, we're all human beings. It's really hard to be objective. What I want to do as a journalist, what I think any politician, any subject wants, is open-mindedness. That you come willing to change your mind. I just met with, Lou Barletta. You know, I could read a lot about him and you have one impression, but then you meet him and you have a different impression. You have to approach the job with an open mind and a sense of fairness. You don't have to love my story, but I want you to feel like I captured your point of view. That, to me, what's really hard about journalism is getting in everyone's shoes. Just don't, set them up and damn them. Like, try to understand their perspective. I mean, on a news story that you have 2 hours to write, I was a daily newspaper reporter for years for the New York Times. You don't really have that. If we're talking about a feature story where you have the time, just go with an open mind and just try to be fair to everybody, that you're capturing their point of view. That's your job as a journalist. Just show reality as you're discovering it.
How do you go about doing that?
Hard work. You do a lot of prep work. You do, you read a lot. I read a lot of articles. So it's not just Hazleton. I'm setting this book, Saving Main Street here in northeastern PA. And so I've just been reading a lot about the area, a couple of books I've bought, articles and stuff. So it starts with prep work. And then I think next, try to reach a range of people. And, it depends on what the topic is. Let's say it's, politics. If you're talking to conservatives, talk to liberals. We all got to see it play out in the 2016 election because obviously the media did not do a good job of capturing what happened in 2016. Outside journalists, I'm one of them. I live in New York. I covered New Orleans after Katrina. I've flown to many places. You fly in and the cliche is you go to a cafe, you interview 2 or 4 people, you write the story, and then you leave. No one's really challenged your preconceived notions. While you're interviewing, you're listening. You can't do that. You can't do that. You have to talk to a range of people. Yes, go to a cafe, go talk to people over coffee in the morning kind of thing. But again, talk to the small business people. Talk to the chamber, talk to the politician, talk to a wide range of people so you feel like you're really getting a sense of what's really happening in this place rather than talk to a few people, fly back home and type up your story in a hotel.
Do you ever go out and do a story that you already have a preconceived notion about that particular story?
Yes, but I think I'm happy to say that I've begun stories thinking that this is the story, and you discover there's a much better story. There's also this thing, and I've been doing this for more than 30 years, I'm old, but it's often what happens is you talk to somebody and you think you know the story, but then you talk to this person and you get a very different perspective and then you're confused and you don't know what the story is. You hate that feeling.
Yes.
So what am I writing? I'm confused. No one likes to feel confused. It's the best. It's the best because, rather than this black or white story, rather than this simple story, reality is pretty complicated. You end up with a more nuanced story. You end up with a more gray story. This person isn't bad, that person's not bad. Just we're all trying our best and this person has that perspective, that person has this perspective, and let's try to kind of meld it together. I hate to say this because I love journalism, I love what I do. It's the death of nuance in this country. It's this side or that side. There's nothing in the middle, anymore. The kind of journalism I do is kind of falling out of favor, at least for the time being. I don't like writing for magazines much anymore. I used to do a lot of magazine writing. You mentioned, New York Times Magazine, Newsweek, etc. They want the gotcha stories.
I've said this on my show. I've been around a long time. and I'm learning every day. Believe me, I'm stupid. This is probably well over my 4,000th show, okay? Met a lot of people, and I'm learning all the time. You know, nobody has a monopoly on ideas. But in the last year or two, I've become so, I say to people, I'm embarrassed to be in the media business today, because when I see how they twist things and do not present what you're talking about, they're not giving you both things. When I was in college, I loved debating. Reason is, 1 month you had a subject matter that you had to be for, and you had to do all your research for that. Then the next month you had to take the opposite side. You had to do all the research for that. And like you said, you meet this person, and once you start finding the opposite side, then you say, wait a minute, I can now make a better decision because I know both sides.
I think it's a more interesting story too. You know, I mean, it's a pretty simple narrative. You're turning on that station or that station. Yeah. It's a pretty simple narrative there, and it's a pretty simple narrative there. Yeah. But reality tends to be a little bit more complicated than that.
Yeah, you know, so when you hear, you know, the meetings that they have at CNN in the morning before, you know, and this was one of the people that reported that at the time, and saying, well, they come in and tell you, what are we going to get on Trump today? We got to do this. We got to. It wasn't creative stuff, okay? I don't know if it still goes on, from what I understand. And so this is what the distortion comes in. And where are we getting the mere facts? When you wrote these books, you didn't get this. You didn't get anywhere in life because you didn't know what you're doing. But it's always that, you know. So some people say, I'm not going to journalism. Look what's happening today. You know, 226 papers or 250 some papers that were writing in 2016, 230 some of them were anti-Trump. Well, could they all be anti-Trump? Can they all not present? So people become discouraged, Gary. You know what I'm trying to say to you?
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying about the media, that people get frustrated. I mean, I do think there are facts, but the problem is so much the way the facts are presented, or they're couched in the point of view. I mean, that's, you know, for better or for worse with the internet, that's what's happened. You know, there's silos. And whatever the news is, one station might not be covering the big news on the other station, or they're presenting the facts, but they're giving it their spin. You never really get to make up your own mind. You're being told that this is the conclusion from these facts.
This is very interesting.
You're on your phone now? You're getting on your phone?
No, I'm gonna. The reason I'm picking this up, okay, this is I have Verizon. Okay. I don't know how I get these notifications. I must have hit something, okay? But I want to tell you, okay, the notifications I get every day, the stories, they have a mess of stories here. 95% of the stories here are anti-Trump. And now, here again, and if it was the other way around, if it was anti-Biden, it was not fair. You don't get to both sides, Gary.
I know, but to complicate the story more, I think some of what confounds the media about Trump is he breaks all the rules, and the way he talks. Like, so today, you know, he referred to 1918 flu epidemic rather than 1918, and he misspoke, and he said that probably quickened the end of World War II, when no doubt he meant World War I. You know, the way the media is built, it just explodes. That is that is probably what you're reading right now.
Well,
he also says the impolite things that you're not supposed to say. So the media does.
Yeah. And guess what? It's called being human. And I'm sure we could go back in good old Republicans before, and good old Democrats before, and good old people who are professors, etc. It's called being human.
Well, but you have to acknowledge that Trump breaks the mold that kind of, you know, he calls it the deep state. Like, you know, in Washington, the people in the middle, whether Republican or Democrat, but they're more or less in the middle, he's breaking every rule. And so they're reacting to that. So, you know, sometimes the news is just that, oh my God, can you believe what Donald Trump said today? It's not that he misspoke. He's just not doing what presidents usually do.
And maybe there's a reason for that. Maybe the rules are not the rules it should be. Okay, I'm talking to Gary Rivlin, folks. Very exciting conversation on journalism. Didn't start off to be a journalism, but creative people. I'll come back. I want to talk about, you know, how we could, how many of us have ideas and things that we could offer and maybe we're in a shell and we got to get out of that shell. We'll be back right after this. Thanks for staying with us, folks. I'm Sam Lesante. You're watching The Sam Lesante Show. Remember, 24/7, ssptv.com. Watch all of the shows we produce. You know, we produce over 21 local neighborhood shows. We're probably the health station. Remember, in Pottsville, we're on Comcast 190 from 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. In the Wilkes-Barre area on Service Electric Communications, Channel 92, every Saturday and Sunday evening from 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. And of course, in the Lackawanna County at Comcast 190, Saturdays and Sunday mornings, 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. My email, sam@ssptv.com. Speaking to Gary Rivlin, who is a journalist and did a lot of interesting writing, wrote for the Times, magazines, wrote a number of books. But he says here, I've told myself that I became a writer because it allows me to constantly learn and grow. But I'm sure my motivations are deeper than that, rooted in some psychological desire or need to communicate and be understood. I find that interesting, okay? And we're talking about people that would like to do things, but sometimes they just don't know how to start, or the creative juices are stymied somehow.
Yeah, for years, you know, I'll be at a party or gathering and like, oh, what do you do? I'm a writer. Inevitably, you know, some of the people are going to say to me like, oh, I want to write a book. And, you know, I love hearing that because, like, you know how I started being a writer? I started writing. My mother right now, 89 years old, has heart and lung issues in New York, right? I mean, that was the epicenter for a while, you know, is largely staying at home. We're bringing her food. And like, but she's writing her memoir. She's always wanted to do it. And I'm encouraging her, just whatever it is for you, write 2 hours a day. Write 500 words a day, write 4 hours a day, whatever you feel comfortable with, and just do it. Don't look back, don't read it over like, oh, this is no good, this is no good. When I write, I just keep writing in a straight line and get to the end. Then when I get to the end, I go back and read it, and it's amazing that something that seems kind of junky, when, you know, as you're writing it, you spend a little bit of time and you can make it really better. Just you work it, you work it, you work it. You know, I use the 10,000 hour rule before. Someone really wants to be a journalist, you just practice. Maybe writing, you know, nowadays you could write, there's a million websites, you might not get paid much of anything, but write and write and write, and you'll get better, and you'll get clips, you'll get articles with your name on it that then you could use to leverage to get better assignments, better paying assignments for more prominent publications. But not to sound like a Nike ad, but just do it. I mean, paint your painting, write your story, and if it's not great, like, well, guess what? My stuff was kind of crappy when I began too, and you know, after a while, I could write award-winning articles. It just takes effort and stick-to-itness, and you know, just turn off that voice in your head. This is no good. Stop. No. Almost no one, unless they're kind of this born genius, it never comes out perfect. You get to rewrite. You know, I don't know from painting, but you get to paint over.
You know, it's interesting. People say, you know, I could write a book. Mm-hmm. You never hear some, you know, I could write a book.
You could write a book.
Yeah, no question. I'm going to write a book.
See?
The thing is that, you know, there is so much talent that's out there today, and some people feel, you know, I don't have a college education, I'm not this, and so they down themselves. But yet, there's some people out there that, some of them don't have educations, are extremely talented, that can offer so much. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I don't feel like I have this innate writing talent. I just think I have this driven stick-to-itness.
Yeah.
You know, that I've just done it, and I do it, and I do it, and I do it. And usually what is driving me is I just find something interesting. I mean, you said the quote already, like, I love that I'm always learning. I'm always meeting interesting people. I used to write about technology. I wrote about politics. You know, I wrote about gambling. I'm writing about small businesses right now, and I just love it because I'm always learning new topics. So that's kind of what's driving me, you know, just this idea of like, I want to talk to interesting people, tell an interesting story. And you know, the hard work is the writing, but you do it. And like, you know, after 2 weeks, you write 500 words a day, you know, you got 5,000 words, you know, and just like, it's just accretion. You just build and build and build.
And did you ever find when you start writing, and then all of a sudden more creativity comes out as you're writing?
Right. People always talk about writer's block. I say, you have writer's block. Don't write what you're writing. Dear Sam, write an email, write a note, tell your friend. Sometimes I'll call up a friend and, what are you writing about? And I'll start talking about it, and I'm taking notes on myself because I am blocked. There's something between me and the computer, but then when I talk it out or I write it more informally as a letter, that's a really good trick I use all the time. I'd recommend anybody at home try that trick.
Folks, I'm talking to Gary Rivlin. He's working on a book now called Saving Main Street. I'm going to come back, talk a little bit about that. He's in northeastern Pennsylvania, interviewing a lot of people. Of course, the best person he's interviewing is going to be me. I'm only kidding. We'll be back right after this. Thanks for staying with us, folks. I'm interviewing Gary Rivlin, who wrote for the New York Times, wrote a number of books. I want you to go to his website, GaryRivlin.com. A number of books he wrote. I'm interested in two things. Katrina, after the flood. I'm sure you learned a lot when you start writing this book about people and what they went through.
Most fascinating assignment of my life. So I was a staff writer for the New York Times, then covering Silicon Valley, but they needed people in New Orleans after Katrina. And so while the city was still flooded 10 days after Katrina, I went there just to help out. And 8 months later, I was still on the storm team. And my piece, in journalism we have beats. My piece was the rebuilding of New Orleans. And I met, a group of families, different parts of town, black, white, all flooded by Katrina, and I just kind of followed them over 10 years and wrote the book Katrina After the Flood. Can they rebuild? Should they rebuild? Will anyone help them rebuild? And it wasn't necessarily a happy ending with each person. Probably my best book, my favorite book.
Did you find out that when you're working with people like that, they have the same common, there's no black or white, everyone's the same, it doesn't make any difference who you are? Did you find that or did...
No, I did though. I mean, it's a little more complicated than that, because in the white community, if the black community was just as self-sufficient as we were, they'd be doing better. Well, they are, because I'm going to the same meetings in the black community as in the white community. They're just not as wealthy. So the black community didn't come back as fast in New Orleans as the white community, but it's just the white community that I was looking at. Lakeview is much wealthier than kind of the black middle class neighborhood.
But they all have the same beat, the heartbeats. They all have the same families. They all have the same goals in life to try to succeed.
We all invest in our homes. We all have that same feeling of wanting to help our families.
So you're in northeastern Pennsylvania, working on Saving Main Street. So what is this book going to be about?
Yeah, so my father was a small business owner. My two brothers were were partners with him for a while. Being small business owner is really, really hard. It just gets harder with, with the chains and the big box stores and the internet and Amazon and globalization and all this, and then the coronavirus hit. So I just had this idea, let's look at kind of how small businesses are doing. We all, left, right, in the middle, doesn't make a difference. Everyone believes in small business. Small business, they sponsor your Little League team, not Amazon, kind of thing. And so I just seemed to me there was something precious that I think is threatened right now. And rather than writing about all these communities around the country, I just love the idea of northeastern PA. You've got Scranton, a well-known medium-sized city. You have a wonderful city like Hazleton. You have the rural areas. I was just in Taconic. So I just wanted kind of a range of small businesses, Main Street retail, restaurants, small manufacturing. How are they doing? Amazing creative stuff, by the way. The things people are doing just to change their business. They had a restaurant, but they can't have people in. Maybe I'll sell in the grocery store. I'll get creative about delivery. It's been really uplifting, actually, to see kind of how these small business owners are working their tails off to save their business and survive. Their community needs it, they need it.
You hit the nail on the head when you said, these people that they go out and they want you to support the little leagues and support the local things, etc. And sometimes the people who've organized these don't support local businesses. Yeah. All right, but yet they want people who are local businesses to support their little leagues, or I'm just mentioning that in general. Gary, it's been a pleasure talking with you. I really enjoyed the interview. I hope that we'll have you back after the book is written, and please share. I think you're able to get people to think a little bit and know that there's someone out there that can help people, you know. So I want to thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Gary Rivlin, folks, go to his website, Gary Rivlin, very simple, RIVLIN.com. The books are all listed there. I'm excited to read the Katrina book because I think there's always learn something about people. And it's so nice to have a journalist and who's not, you know, one-sided, but he's looking at facts. And that's nice to hear. We'll see you next time.